Keeper Vorthak straightened his ceremonial sash and cleared his throat with a sound like gravel in a blender. Today was the day he'd been preparing for his entire career. Well, the last 3 rotations anyway. Ambassador Glixen from the Galactic Conservation Council was here for the official inspection, and Vorthak was determined to show off the crown jewel of the Zentorian Xenological Preserve. "Ambassador Glixen, if you would direct your optical sensors this way," Vorthak announced, his voice dripping with the kind of pride usually reserved for parents at graduation ceremonies. He gestured dramatically toward a massive reinforced doorway marked with enough warning symbols to make a nuclear waste facility jealous. "I present to you the ultra-security Apex Predator Wing, housing the most dangerous specimens from the recently discovered planet designated as Sol 3. Ambassador Glixen, a dignified creature who looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a philosophy professor, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Ah yes, the Death World. Your reports were quite alarming. Remind me again why we're keeping these creatures instead of simply cataloging them from a safe distance." "Scientific advancement, Ambassador." Vorthak practically bounced on his 6 legs. "These Sol 3 specimens represent the pinnacle of evolutionary aggression. Each one is a perfectly designed killing machine, shaped by millions of years of brutal survival on a planet so hostile that even the plants are carnivorous." They paused before the first exhibit, where a massive brown bear was currently doing the least intimidating thing possible, rolling around in a pile of leaves like an oversized teddy bear having the time of its life. "Behold the North American Ursus arctos," Vorthak whispered reverently. "Notice the massive claws, the powerful jaw structure, the raw muscle mass. This specimen can tear through solid wood with its bare appendages and has been known to flip vehicles weighing several tons when enraged." The bear chose that exact moment to sneeze and tumble backward, landing in an undignified heap with its legs in the air. "Most formidable," Ambassador Glixen observed dryly. They moved to the next enclosure, where a pack of gray wolves was engaged in what could only be described as the world's most vicious game of tag. One wolf had somehow gotten his head stuck in a feeding bowl and was running in circles, while his packmates seemed to find this absolutely hilarious. "The Canis lupus pack hunters," Vorthak continued, seemingly oblivious to the comedy unfolding behind the reinforced glass. "Coordinated killers with bite forces exceeding 400 pounds per square inch. They can track prey across vast distances and work together to bring down creatures 10 times their size." "I can see the cooperation," the ambassador said, watching as 3 wolves tried to simultaneously help and mock their bull-headed companion. But Vorthak was just getting warmed up. "And here, Ambassador, we have the true crown jewel of our collection." He pressed his face against the viewing window with the enthusiasm of a kid at a candy store. "The African lion's Panthera leo, the apex predators of the Sol 3 savanna ecosystem." Inside the habitat, a magnificent male lion was sprawled in a patch of artificial sunlight, looking for all the world like he was posing for a luxury cat food commercial. His mane caught the light perfectly, and his powerful frame spoke of barely contained lethality. It was, admittedly, an impressive sight. "The male specimen alone weighs over 400 of your standard units," Vorthak explained, consulting his datapad with the fervor of a sports commentator. "Bite force of 650 pounds per square inch, capable of bringing down prey weighing up to 1,000 units. The perfect fusion of stealth, power, and tactical intelligence." The lion yawned, showing off those famous fangs, then promptly fell asleep mid-stretch. "Our containment systems are, naturally, state-of-the-art," Vorthak bragged, tapping various control panels. "Triple redundant force fields, automated sedation systems, and environmental controls that can simulate everything from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest. Nothing gets in or out without our explicit authorization." Ambassador Glixen nodded slowly, though his expression suggested he was beginning to wonder if the real entertainment value here was watching Vorthak's theatrical performance rather than the animals themselves. "I must admit, Keeper Vorthak, when your initial reports described Sol 3 as a death world populated by apex predators, I expected something more immediately threatening." "Oh, but Ambassador, you must understand." Vorthak's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a true believer. "These creatures are deceptive in their current state. In their natural habitat, they are instruments of pure destruction. The only reason they appear docile now is due to our superior containment and our complete understanding of their behavioral patterns. As if the universe had a sense of timing, The feeding alarm chose that moment to sound. Immediately, the entire wing transformed. Bears reared up on hind legs, wolves howled in perfect harmony, and the lions rose with fluid grace that made every movement look like a carefully choreographed dance of death. "You see?" Vorthak whispered, his voice full of awe. "Magnificent, aren't they?" Ambassador Glixen had to admit, watching the animals respond to feeding time was genuinely impressive. There was a primal elegance to their movements, a reminder that despite their current playful antics, these were indeed creatures that had earned their place at the top of their respective food chains. "Most educational, Keeper Vorthak," the ambassador conceded, "though I do wonder about the theoretical scenario where one of these apex predators were to encounter the species that shares their planet. What are these humans like in comparison?" Vortak's expression shifted to something that could only be described as academic smugness mixed with barely contained terror. "Ah, the humans. Well, Ambassador, let's just say there's a very good reason we've never attempted to acquire a human specimen. According to our research, they're the ultimate apex predator. Even these magnificent creatures would be helpless against a human's superior intellect and tool-making capabilities." Neither of them noticed the maintenance airlock cycling in the background, or the confused-looking figure in work coveralls who had just stumbled through what he'd assumed was a really fancy door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Jake Rodriguez stood in what appeared to be the world's most expensive hallway, scratching his head and wondering if he'd accidentally wandered into some kind of elaborate movie set. One moment he'd been fixing a faulty ventilation system at the Natural History Museum, following what looked like a service tunnel, and now he was standing in a corridor that seemed to be made entirely of brushed metal and glowing panels. "Okay, this is definitely not the museum's basement," he muttered to himself, adjusting his tool belt. The corridor stretched in both directions, lined with what looked like viewing windows. Through one, he could swear he saw a polar bear playing with what appeared to be a beach ball the size of a small car. Meanwhile, approximately 50 feet away, Keeper Vorthak was in the middle of explaining the theoretical combat capabilities of a Siberian tiger when his datapads started screaming. Not beeping, not chiming, but actually screaming, with the kind of alarm usually reserved for imminent reactor meltdowns. "What in the 7 moons of Craxus is that?" Ambassador Glixen demanded, his mandibles clicking in alarm. Vortak stared at his pad in horror, his skin cycling through several colors that had no equivalent in human language but roughly translated to "oh no, oh no, oh no." "Containment breach," he whispered, then louder. "Containment breach. Security Protocol 7. We have an unauthorized specimen loose in the apex wing." The ambassador's eye stalk swiveled in panic. "Which specimen? Please tell me it's not the honey badger." "Worse." Vorthak's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. "According to the biosensors, we have a human in the facility." The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for moments right before very bad things happen in horror movies. Jake, meanwhile, had discovered that the viewing windows were actually viewing windows and was currently staring in fascination at a family of grizzly bears who seemed just as curious about him as he was about them. One of the cubs had pressed its nose against the glass, right where Jake's hand was, creating an oddly touching moment that would have made for a great social media post if Jake had any idea where he was or how he'd gotten there. "Hey there, big guy," Jake said softly to the adult male bear, who had ambled over to investigate the strange new visitor. "You're a long way from Yellowstone, aren't you?" Back in the control room, Vortak was having what could generously be called a complete nervous breakdown. How did it get in? How did a human get past our security systems? Our sensors should have detected a predator of that caliber from 3 sectors away. "Calm yourself, Keeper," Ambassador Glixen said, though his own voice had gone up several octaves. "Perhaps it's not actually a human. Perhaps it's some other species that merely resembles the descriptions." Vortak pulled up the bioscanner readings, his hands shaking so badly he could barely operate the controls. Bipedal locomotion, opposable thumbs, forward-facing eyes indicating predator evolution, and, oh, sweet cosmic radiation. It's tool user. Look at the equipment attached to its body. On the screen, Jake's tool belt looked like some kind of elaborate weapon harness, to eyes that had never seen a Phillips head screwdriver. "Sound the alarm," Ambassador Glixen commanded. "Evacuate the facility. We need to contact the Galactic Defense Force immediately." "But, Ambassador, if we admit that a human specimen breached our containment, my career will be over. The Xenological Preserve will lose its funding. Do you know how hard it is to get a job in exotic species management these days?" Jake had moved on from the bears and was now looking at what he was pretty sure was the most elaborate wolf habitat he'd ever seen. The pack had noticed him and were doing that thing dogs do when they're trying to decide if a new person is friend or foe. Heads tilted, ears perked, tails in that neutral position that could go either way. "Well, aren't you guys gorgeous?" Jake said, genuinely impressed. "Though I've got to say, this is either the most realistic zoo exhibit ever built, or I'm having the weirdest concussion dream in medical history." One of the wolves, apparently deciding that Jake passed the vibe check, started wagging its tail. Within seconds, the entire pack was doing what could only be described as the canine equivalent of excited chittering. Back in the control room, this display of pack behavior was being interpreted somewhat differently. "It's communicating with them!" Vorthak shrieked, pointing at the screen where Jake was clearly making some kind of tactical alliance with the wolf pack. "The human is coordinating a pack hunting strategy!" Ambassador Glixen watched in fascination and horror as Jake moved to the next exhibit. "Keeper Vorthak, in your professional opinion, how long do we have before it organizes a full-scale predator uprising?" "Minutes, maybe less," Vorthak said, frantically typing commands into his control system. "I'm activating emergency containment protocols. If we can flood the corridors with sleeping gas before it reaches the lion exhibit." "The lion exhibit?" "Ambassador, if the human forms an alliance with the lions, we'll have an apex predator coalition that could tear through our hull like tissue paper. We need to stop it before—" They both turned to look at the main screen, which showed Jake Rodriguez standing directly in front of the African lion habitat, hands pressed against the viewing glass, grinning like a kid at Christmas morning. "Oh no," Vorthak whispered. "Oh no, indeed," Ambassador Glixen agreed. Jake, still completely oblivious to the panic he was causing, noticed what looked like a maintenance panel near the lion exhibit. His repair instincts kicked in automatically when he saw a blinking red light that usually meant something needed fixing. Looks like there's a malfunction in the containment system," he said to himself, pulling out his multi-tool. "Better take a look." In the control room, two aliens watched in mounting terror as the human began doing what humans do best, solving problems by taking things apart. Jake had seen a lot of maintenance panels in his 15 years of fixing things that other people had broken, but this one was definitely in his top 10 for most unnecessarily complicated. The blinking red light was clearly indicating some kind of system error, and his professional pride wouldn't let him just walk away from a problem that was literally flashing for attention. "Let's see here," he muttered, consulting the universal language of maintenance work, poking things until they either fix themselves or break in a more obvious way. Red light usually means containment field malfunction, power coupling issues, or... He pressed what looked like a reset button. Or maybe it just needs a good old-fashioned reboot. The containment field around the lion exhibit flickered and died. In the control room, Keeper Vorthak made a sound like a deflating balloon having an existential crisis. "It disabled the containment field. The human has weaponized our own technology against us." Ambassador Glixen was rapidly cycling through colors that would have been beautiful if they weren't indicating sheer terror. "How is that possible? Those controls require 12 different authorization codes and a doctoral degree in xenotechnology." "It's a human, Ambassador. They're tool users. Apparently our security measures are no match for their technological adaptation capabilities." Meanwhile, Jake was staring through the now unshielded glass at the most magnificent lion he'd ever seen. The big male had risen to his feet and was looking directly at Jake with those amber eyes that seemed to contain about 1,000 years of accumulated wisdom and dignity. "Well, hello there, handsome," Jake said softly. "You're even more impressive up close." The lion tilted his head, exactly the way a house cat does when trying to figure out if the thing making noise is interesting or just annoying. After a moment of consideration, he took a step closer to the glass. Jake, who had grown up with dogs, cats, and a particularly ornery pet iguana named Ferdinand, recognized the universal animal language of cautious curiosity. Without really thinking about it, he sat down cross-legged on the floor, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Yeah, I know, weird day for both of us, right? One minute you're taking a nap, next minute there's some random guy in coveralls staring at you through the window." The lion sat down as well, mirroring Jake's posture in that uncanny way that big cats sometimes do. They regarded each other through the glass like two neighbors who'd just met over the fence and were trying to decide if they were going to be friends or just polite acquaintances. In the control room, this peaceful moment was being interpreted as something considerably more sinister. "It's establishing dominance," Vorthak whispered, his voice shaking. "Look at the posturing behavior. The human is demonstrating that it's not afraid of the apex predator." But the lion is responding, Ambassador Glixen observed, with the kind of fascination usually reserved for watching natural disasters from a safe distance. I've never seen a Sol 3 predator display submissive behavior toward anything. What happened next would be talked about in xenobiology circles for decades to come, assuming anyone survived to tell the story. Jake noticed that there was what looked like a service entrance to the habitat, probably for cleaning and feeding. The door had a simple mechanical latch that had been left unlocked, probably by whatever automated system had been maintaining the exhibit. Without really thinking about the implications, Jake opened the door and stepped inside. Nunu! Vorthak's scream could probably be heard 3 sectors away. Jake found himself standing in artificial African savanna, complete with the scent of grass and that particular smell that big cats have, sort of like warm fur and contentment. The lion was now only about 10 feet away, still sitting, still watching Jake with those intelligent eyes. Okay, this is either gonna go really well or really badly, Jake said conversationally. And honestly, buddy, I've had weirder days. He took a step forward. The lion stayed put. Another step. The lion's tail twitched once, but otherwise remained still. Jake knelt down and extended his hand, the same way he'd approach any large animal he wasn't sure about. Easy there, big guy. I'm not here to cause any trouble. The lion leaned forward, and with a delicacy that would have made a surgeon jealous, sniffed Jake's outstretched hand. Then, in a moment that shattered every xenobiological theory about Sol 3 predator behavior, the lion rubbed his massive head against Jake's palm, like an overgrown house cat looking for attention. Well, I'll be damned, Jake grinned, scratching behind the lion's ears. You're just a big kitty, aren't you? The lion began to purr, not the tiny rumble of a house cat, but a sound like a diesel engine running on contentment. Within moments, Jake was sitting in the grass with 400 pounds of apex predator sprawled across his lap like the world's most dangerous therapy animal. The female lions, who had been watching this entire exchange with the kind of careful attention cats reserve for potential threats or particularly interesting toys, apparently decided that if the pride leader approved of this strange new creature, then it must be acceptable. One by one, they approached, until Jake was completely surrounded by a pride of lions who seemed to view him as some kind of honorary member. In the control room, Keeper Vorthak had gone completely catatonic. Ambassador Glixen was frantically taking notes, because if he was going to die in the inevitable predator uprising, at least his observations might be useful to science. The human has achieved complete pack dominance, he dictated to his recording device. The lions are displaying submissive, almost affectionate behavior. This contradicts every known principle of Sol 3 predator psychology. On the screen, Jake was currently having his hair groomed by a lioness, while the big male used his leg as a pillow. One of the cubs had decided that Jake's tool belt was the most interesting thing in the universe and was batting at a wrench with the focused intensity that only baby animals can achieve. Hey, careful with that, Jake laughed, gently extracting his tools from tiny paws. That's how I make a living. He looked around at his new friends and shook his head in amazement. I don't know where I am or how I got here, but you guys are definitely the highlight of the tour. The lion cub mewed at him, a sound so ridiculously cute coming from a future apex predator that Jake couldn't help but grin. Yeah, you're pretty great too, kiddo. In the control room, Ambassador Glixen turned to the catatonic Vorthak. Keeper, I think we need to reconsider our entire approach to Sol 3 species management. Vorthak could only nod weakly as they watched the humans scratch a lion behind the ears and apparently discuss something important with a lioness who was listening with the kind of attention usually reserved for job interviews. Also, the ambassador added thoughtfully, I think we should probably figure out how to get it out of there before it decides to organize them into some kind of tactical formation. As if on cue, Jake stood up, gently moving lions aside like he was rearranging particularly heavy cushions. All right, guys, this has been great, but I should probably figure out where I am and how to get home. He started walking toward what looked like another exit, completely unaware that he was heading directly toward the North American grizzly bear exhibit. Behind him, the entire lion pride stood up and began following him like he was the world's most casual Pied Piper. Oh no, Ambassador Glixen whispered. It's mobilizing them. Jake had to admit, having a lion escort was definitely a first, even by his admittedly flexible standards for weird workdays. The big male was padding along beside him like a golden retriever with serious anger management training, while the females flanked him in what he assumed was probably their version of a protective formation. You know, guys, I appreciate the company, but where I come from, this would probably cause a bit of a stir, he said conversationally to his newfound pride. Though I guess wherever we are, the rules might be different. He approached what was obviously another habitat, this one decorated to look like a North American forest, complete with a realistic-looking stream and enough logs to build a small cabin. The massive brown bear inside was currently engaged in the highly dignified activity of trying to catch fish that kept slipping out of his paws in increasingly comedic ways. "Oh, hey there, big fella," Jake called out cheerfully. "Having some trouble with lunch?" The bear looked up from his fishing attempts and did a double take that would have been hilarious if it weren't for the fact that he weighed about 800 pounds. His small, intelligent eyes took in Jake, then the parade of lions behind him, then back to Jake again, with an expression that clearly said, "Well, this is new." In the control room, Dr. Blenda Clicks had arrived just in time to witness what she was already mentally cataloging as either the greatest xenobiological discovery of the century, or the prelude to the most unusual mass casualty event in recorded history. "Keeper Vorthak, please tell me you have some kind of explanation for why there's a human casually strolling through our apex predator wing, followed by what appears to be an entire lion pride," she said in the tone of voice people use when they're trying very hard to remain calm. Vorthak had progressed beyond catatonic, and had reached a zen-like state of complete acceptance that his career was over. "Dr. Clicks, I've given up trying to understand anything that's happening today. I'm just documenting it for the inevitable investigation." "And the containment protocols?" "Failed. Repeatedly. The human appears to be immune to our security measures, and has somehow achieved pack bond status with multiple apex predator species." Dr. Clicks adjusted her optical enhancers and stared at the screens in fascination. "That's theoretically impossible. Sol 3 predators are territorial, aggressive, and specifically evolved to compete with each other for resources." On screen, Jake had somehow gotten into the bear habitat and was currently demonstrating proper fish-catching technique to an 800-pound grizzly who was watching with the focused attention of a student taking notes. "See, you've got to be patient," Jake explained, standing knee-deep in the artificial stream. "Wait for them to get comfortable, then just—" He scooped up a fish with practiced ease. "Quick and smooth. No sudden movements." The bear attempted to mimic Jake's technique and, miraculously, actually caught a fish on his first try. The look of surprised delight on the massive predator's face was almost endearing enough to make everyone forget he could bite through a car door. "Attaboy," Jake grinned, patting the bear on what would have been his shoulder if bears had shoulders in the traditional sense. "Natural fisherman, aren't you?" The bear made a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a purr, then gently headbutted Jake in what was clearly meant to be an affectionate gesture but looked terrifyingly violent to anyone who didn't understand bear body language. "Dr. Cliggs," Ambassador Glickson said slowly, "in your professional opinion, what exactly are we witnessing here?" Dr. Cliggs was frantically taking notes, her recording device working overtime to capture every detail. "I believe we're observing the theoretical concept of interspecies pack bonding in real time. The human isn't dominating these creatures through fear or aggression. It's actually teaching them—" "Teaching them what?" "Skills. Social behaviors. Look at the interaction patterns." She pointed to the screen where Jake was now sitting by the stream with the bear beside him, while the lions had arranged themselves in a semicircle, like they were attending the world's most dangerous nature documentary. "The human is demonstrating cooperative behavior, and the predators are responding with trust-based social bonding." Vorthak finally found his voice again. "But that's impossible. These species would never cooperate in the wild. They're evolutionary competitors." "Unless," Dr. Click said slowly, a look of dawning realization crossing her features, "they're not actually competitors. Unless they all evolved alongside something else. Something that taught them that cooperation was more beneficial than competition." Jake, meanwhile, had noticed another habitat across the way, where a pack of wolves was watching the proceedings with obvious interest. The alpha female was pacing along the edge of her enclosure with the kind of focused energy that suggested she very much wanted to be part of whatever social group was forming around this strange new creature. "Hang on, guys," Jake said to his growing menagerie. "Looks like someone else wants to join the party." He approached the wolf habitat, and within minutes had somehow managed to figure out the containment system well enough to open it safely. The wolf pack emerged cautiously, but once they caught the scent of the other animals and realized that everyone was remarkably chill, they immediately integrated into what was beginning to look less like a collection of apex predators and more like the world's most dangerous social club. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Clicks whispered, watching as Jake somehow ended up in the middle of what appeared to be an interspecies play session. Lions, bears, and wolves were interacting peacefully, with Jake serving as some kind of neutral moderator who could communicate with all of them. The human isn't controlling them, she realized. It's mediating. It's facilitating social bonding between species that should be natural enemies. Ambassador Glickson watched as Jake taught a wolf pup and a lion cub to play together while their respective parents looked on with what could only be described as proud approval. Dr. Klicks, I think we need to completely reconsider our understanding of Sol-3 ecosystem dynamics. Agreed. And Ambassador? I think we also need to figure out how to communicate with the human before it accidentally organizes the entire menagerie into some kind of cooperative social structure. As if summoned by their conversation, Jake looked up from where he was currently serving as a climbing gym for various young predators, and seemed to notice, for the first time, the observation windows and the flashing lights that indicated he was being monitored. He waved cheerfully at what he assumed were zoo staff members watching from the control room. "Hey there," he called out. "Hope you don't mind that I'm helping out with the animals. They seemed kind of lonely, and I've got some time to kill while I figure out where I am." In the control room, 3 aliens stared at the screen in complete silence. Finally, Vorthak spoke. Did the apex predator just wave at us? Dr. Klick's mind was racing faster than a quantum processor, trying to calculate the improbability of everything she was witnessing. She pulled up every piece of data they had on Sol-3 ecosystem dynamics, cross-referencing behavioral patterns, evolutionary timelines, and species distribution maps, with the kind of frantic energy usually reserved for trying to prevent galactic wars. "Ambassador, Keeper Vorthak, I need you to look at this," she said, projecting a holographic display of Sol-3's evolutionary tree. "I think I've been approaching this completely wrong." On the screen, Jake was currently engaged in what appeared to be a complicated game involving a stick, 3 different species of predator, and rules that seemed to change depending on who was participating. The animals were taking turns, sharing resources, and displaying cooperative behaviors that should have been impossible, according to every textbook Dr. Klicks had ever read. "Look at the timeline," she continued, highlighting various branches of the evolutionary tree. "All of these apex predators, lions, bears, wolves, they all evolved during the same general period. But look at this anomaly here." She pointed to a section of the timeline that seemed to indicate a massive shift in evolutionary pressure around 300,000 years ago. Something changed the entire dynamic of Sol-3's ecosystem during this period, something that made cooperation more beneficial than competition for all these species. Ambassador Glickson leaned closer to the display. What kind of environmental pressure could cause that kind of widespread behavioral evolution? Dr. Klicks pulled up another data set, this one showing the emergence timeline of Sol-3's dominant species. Not environmental pressure, Ambassador, social pressure. Look at when humans first appeared as a distinct species. The timeline showed human evolution beginning right around the same period as the behavioral changes in other predators. "By the cosmic void," Vorthak whispered, his earlier panic replaced by scientific fascination. "You're suggesting that humans weren't just another apex predator. They were the apex predator that all the others learned to coexist with." "Exactly." Dr. Klick's excitement was building as the pieces fell into place. Humans didn't outcompete these species. They formed cooperative relationships with them. Look at the humans' behavior patterns. On screen, Jake had somehow convinced a wolf to help him teach a bear cub proper fishing technique, while a lioness supervised with the patient attention of a kindergarten teacher. "The human isn't demonstrating dominance," Dr. Klicks explained. "It's demonstrating what humans call pack bonding, the ability to form cooperative social structures with other species based on mutual benefit rather than hierarchical control." She pulled up more data, her voice getting more excited with each revelation. "Humans didn't just domesticate a few species. They developed the ability to form temporary pack bonds with virtually any creature they encounter. It's why all these predators are responding positively instead of seeing the human as a threat or competitor." Ambassador Glickson was staring at the screen in amazement as Jake scratched a grizzly bear behind the ears while using his other hand to play tug-of-war with a wolf. "So, you're saying humans evolved to be cooperative apex predators?" "More than that," Dr. Klick said, pulling up comparative behavioral analysis charts. "I think humans became the species that taught all the other apex predators how to be social. They became the universal translator for interspecies cooperation." As if to prove her point, Jake had apparently noticed some kind of tension between the alpha wolf and the male lion, and was currently mediating what looked like a diplomatic discussion between 2 species that should have been mortal enemies. "See that?" Dr. Klicks pointed to Jake's body language. The human is using calming gestures, neutral positioning, and resource-sharing behavior to diffuse potential conflict. It's not just pack bonding, it's pack leadership through cooperation rather than dominance. Vortak was rapidly taking notes, his earlier career concerns forgotten in the face of what was clearly the xenobiological discovery of the millennium. This explains everything. Why all the Sol 3 predators show unusual social intelligence, why they're capable of forming relationships outside their species, why they respond to training and cooperative behavior. Damien learned it from humans, Dr. Klix confirmed. Over hundreds of thousands of years of coevolution, these species developed the ability to recognize and respond to human pack bonding behaviors. Jake chose that moment to look up at the observation windows again and tap his watch in the universal gesture for "what time is it?" When no one responded, he shrugged and started making exaggerated pointing gestures toward what appeared to be an exit sign. "I think," he called out to the observation windows, "I might be lost. Could someone maybe point me toward the exit? I've got to get back to work, and my supervisor is going to have questions if I'm gone much longer." The three aliens stared at each other in sudden realization. "The human doesn't know where it is," Ambassador Glixen said slowly. "The human doesn't know we're aliens," Vorthak added. "The human," Dr. Click concluded with growing horror, "thinks this is a normal Sol 3 zoological facility, and we're the staff." Jake, meanwhile, had pulled out what appeared to be a small rectangular device and was holding it up toward the ceiling with the frustrated expression of someone trying to get cell phone reception in a dead zone. "Great, no signal," he muttered. "Okay, guys." He addressed his menagerie of deadly predators. "Looks like we're gonna have to figure this out the old-fashioned way. Anyone know the way to the parking lot?" A wolf pup yipped helpfully and started trotting toward what appeared to be a maintenance corridor. "Thanks, buddy. You're probably smarter than the GPS anyway." In the control room, Dr. Klix was frantically calculating the implications of their situation. "Ambassador, we have a problem. The human is treating this like a routine situation because to a human, cooperative interspecies bonding is routine. We're not witnessing aberrant behavior, we're witnessing normal human social patterns." "Meaning?" "Meaning every assumption we've made about humans being ultra-predators is wrong. They're not destroyers, they're ecosystem integrators. They're the species that makes all the other species work together." Ambassador Glixen watched as Jake organized his newfound pack into what appeared to be a search formation, with different animals checking different corridors while maintaining some kind of communication system that involved hand signals and various animal vocalizations. "Dr. Klix, I think we need to establish communication with the human immediately, not as specimen handlers, but as, what's the human term, hosts." "Agreed," Dr. Klix said, already moving toward the communication systems. "And Ambassador, I think we also need to completely rewrite our xenobiological classification system." On the screen, Jake had apparently found what he was looking for and was waving goodbye to his animal friends with promises to come back and visit soon. The entire menagerie was watching him go with expressions that could only be described as fond farewell. "Also," Vorthak added weakly, "I think I need to update my resume." Dr. Klix activated the facility's communication system with the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for first contact protocols, which, technically, this was. Hello, human," her voice echoed through the corridor where Jake was currently saying goodbye to a wolf pack. "Please do not be alarmed. We are zoo staff, and we would like to offer you assistance." Jake looked up at the nearest speaker with obvious relief. "Oh, thank God, finally. I was starting to think this place was completely automated. Listen, I somehow got turned around in your maintenance tunnels and ended up in what I'm guessing is your backstage area. Your animals are fantastic, by the way. Best socialized predators I've ever seen." Ambassador Glixen took over the communication. "Yes, we pride ourselves on our animal care. Might we ask what your background is with animal management?" Jake laughed. "Well, I'm just a maintenance guy, but I actually work part-time at the San Diego Zoo on weekends. Been doing animal care for about 10 years now. Your setup here is incredible, though. I've never seen habitat simulation this realistic. The environmental controls alone must have cost a fortune." The three aliens looked at each other in stunned silence. "San Diego Zoo," Dr. Klix whispered. "It works at another zoological facility. A part-time animal care specialist," Vorthak added faintly. "Ambassador," Dr. Quick said into the communicator, trying to keep her voice steady, "would you be interested in consulting on our animal care protocols? We seem to be having some behavioral management issues with our specimens." "Are you kidding? I'd love to help. Though I've got to warn you, some of your containment systems need work." Half the safety locks weren't even engaged, and your environmental enrichment could use some upgrades. These guys are way too smart to be sitting around bored all day. Jake paused thoughtfully. Actually, if you're hiring, I might be interested in a full-time position. This is definitely the most advanced facility I've ever seen. How exactly do you get your habitats to feel so realistic? Ambassador Glixen cleared his throat. We would be very interested in discussing employment opportunities. Perhaps we could arrange transportation back to your current location, while we prepare a formal offer. That would be great. Fair warning, though, I'm going to need some pretty detailed explanations about your technology. This place is like nothing I've ever seen before. Vortak had pulled up the facility's employment database and was already drafting a job posting for Human Interspecies Relations Specialist, with a salary that would probably bankrupt a small planet. Oh, and one more thing. Jake's voice came through the communicator cheerfully. You might want to check your air filtration system in Section C. There's a weird humming that suggests bearing failure in one of the main units. Should be an easy fix, but if you let it go, you're looking at a complete system replacement. Dr. Klix looked at her colleagues. The Human is offering to fix our life support systems. Of course it is, Ambassador Glixen said with the weary acceptance of someone whose entire worldview had been demolished and rebuilt in the span of an afternoon. Why wouldn't the cooperative ecosystem integrator want to help maintain the habitat? As they arranged for Jake's transportation back to Earth, complete with a formal job offer and a very carefully worded explanation of their advanced zoological research facility, Vortak was already rewriting the training manual for interspecies management. The new Chapter 1 would be titled, Sometimes the best way to handle apex predators is to ask the human to scratch them behind the ears. Jake Rodriguez, meanwhile, was already planning his weekend project list, completely unaware that he'd just revolutionized xenobiology and accidentally gotten himself recruited as the galaxy's first human-alien zoo consultant. It was, he reflected as he waved goodbye to his new animal friends, definitely going in his top 5 for interesting workdays.